What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you on another Wednesday night of What's the Word Dirty Bird. We do this every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I'm going to give you guys a chance to get in here in the chat, but what's going on? How's your Wednesday going so far? We're going to get into some NFC South talk. We're going to do some breakdowns of each team's, the strengths, the weaknesses of each team, and how our Falcons match up with our division foes. But as you guys come in here, as always, we're going to do the shout outs real quick. When you guys come in here, we're going to do some brief Atlanta Falcons news as well. Not a whole lot of Atlanta Falcons news. We're going to do some Atlanta Falcons news as well. But I hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. Like I said, I enjoy doing this every Wednesday night. If you haven't already, definitely hit that like button as you come in. Hit that subscribe button here at Jew Talk Sports, also Atlanta Falcons Nation. We appreciate that. We're both on the road to 2K. Both me at Jew Talk Sports and Atlanta Falcons Nation. We're on the road to 2K. We're trying to hit that 2K before the regular season kicks off in September. So definitely go ahead, hit that like, subscribe button. Like I said, not just here at Jew Talk Sports, but Atlanta Falcons Nation, Mad Mike Sports, Twisted Torch TV, Just K Styles. Everybody that's a part of the crew, definitely go over Miss Maggie T. Definitely hit that subscribe button. She just hit 500 subscribers. So get her to 1,000 as well. She's on the road to 1K on her own channel. So definitely go over and do that as well. But I'm going to go ahead in the chat. I see so far in the chat, we got Lucas. What it do, man? And we got Ezekiel the King. What's going on, man? But we're going to jump into some Atlanta Falcons news first. And we're not going to be too long with Atlanta Falcons news. Yesterday, I did a video. You guys can go check it out on Jew Talk Sports. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, or if you haven't already hit that notification bell so you know when I do Atlanta Falcons content. I did talk about Kyle Pitts. Basically, that's the only Atlanta Falcons news that we have is Kyle Pitts signing that massive contract of $32.9 million over 4 years. Guaranteed. I believe it's a fully guaranteed contract, and he has a 5th-year option where the team could pick up his 5th-year option when we get to that point. I also seen a couple more of you guys have come in here. I see Dan the Man. What's going on, man? I appreciate that. Divine. What's going on, Divine? The wife in the building. What's going on? Yeah, like she said, please hit that like, share, subscribe. We want this to reach as many people as possible. Paul Stevens, what's going on, man? Says Dirty Bird for life. Most definitely. But like I was stating, pretty much so far, just in Atlanta Falcons news this week, pretty much we see Blackheart. What's going on, Blackheart? But like I said, we've seen this week pretty much so far. The only thing that's really happened this week was the signing of Kyle Pitts. A couple shows ago, we had a couple of fans or a couple of you guys, subscribers, asked about Kyle Pitts and would he sign his contract. And I told you guys I wasn't too worried about Terry Fontenot getting the deal done. It possibly was just a couple wrinkles they needed to iron out. And pretty much they've ironed it out. And he'll be there at training camp, the start of training camp. And I think Terry Fontenot has done a great job of bringing in these rookies, getting these guys signed. Now that we've moved on from Julio Jones and we created that cap space, we were able to go ahead and get the deals done with the rookie class. And at this point in Atlanta Falcons news, we're just waiting on training camp to kick off. But tonight we're going to get into the state of the NFC South. So let's jump right into that. We're going to put the banner up here. The state of the NFC South. We're going to talk about all 4 teams tonight. Personally, I think the NFC South is one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL. Over the last 10 years or the last decade, it's been a really competitive division. We've had 2 different teams go to Super Bowls. Well, actually, 2 different teams within the last decade go to Super Bowls. The Saints are the team that went to a couple NFC championships. They didn't reach the Super Bowl. We did have Cam Newton a couple years ago with the Panthers. They went 15-1, and they got to the Super Bowl, lost to the Denver Broncos. We had our Atlanta Falcons in 2016, got to the Super Bowl and lost to the Pats. And then we had the Saints get to, I believe, two two of the last three, or they were in a couple of NFC Championship games. I believe against the Rams, they got into where they had that blown call against the Rams was the NFC Championship game, and then they had two where they lost in the first round to the Vikings. But we had the Buccaneers just win the championship last year. So all four teams are really competitive, have played in Super Bowls, and that just goes to show how tough our division is in the NFC South. But I expect this division to be very competitive this year as well. It has been some flux in this upcoming season, being that Drew Brees retired. It's some flux with the Saints, with Julio Jones being traded to the Tennessee Titans. Now we've seen some changes in Atlanta as well. Last year, we had with the Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule take over as the head coach, and they let go of Cam Newton. So all of these teams are kind of in flux. And then last year, the Buccaneers were able to bring in Tom Brady, and they were able to get all the way to the Super Bowl and hoist that Lombardi trophy. So I feel like when talking about the NFC South and the teams to beat in the NFC South, we have to start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they did win the Super Bowl. I know a lot of people are going to say the Saints are the team that's the team to beat in the NFC South because they won the division the last 3 years. But personally, I think that the team to beat is the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They brought back all 22 of their starters from last year, which is pretty much unheard of in this cap era. You know, with a hard cap, a lot of teams are not able to keep together their nucleus or keep together that full roster from a Super Bowl year. Usually players go on to greener pastures and they go on and sign with other teams. And usually the team that won the Super Bowl is outbidded. But the Buccaneers, somehow, some way, they were able to bring back pretty much everybody that they had as free agents. And they were able to add to their team in the draft. And I think they did a really good job. Their front office is doing a great job there in Tampa Bay. And I do think that Tampa Bay is the team to beat in this division. Now, I do believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the most complete team. I did go and look at all of the rosters before tonight's show because I haven't had a chance to actually do that so far since the draft. But I did go in and take a deep dive and look at each roster from top to bottom. And from top to bottom, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, barring injury, to me, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the team to beat, and they're the cream of the crop when it comes to talent. To me, they have the most talent in our division, and I do think that it's going to be tough to dethrone the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this upcoming season. Now, like you heard me say just a moment ago, barring injury, injuries, play a huge factor in the NFL, especially because it's a really physical sport and every team has injuries. But I think that the Buccaneers have a lot of depth as well. They have great depth on their team. Just looking at the defensive line for the Buccaneers, Shaq Barrett was able to re-sign. Ndamukong Suh came back and signed with their team. They're pretty much loaded on that defensive line. And then they brought in Joe Tryon. He was their first round draft pick. He's a defensive end out of the University of Washington. He's a guy that goes about 6'3", 6'4". And J-Rock would love me talking about Joe Tryon. He was a guy that J-Rock here at Atlanta Falcons Nation wanted us to actually draft. But I think they did a great job in the draft. They strengthened the strength because I believe that the strength of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the defensive side of the ball is that defensive line. I think that the weakness for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their Achilles heel, is going to be that secondary. They're really young on that secondary. They did draft Antoine Winfield Jr. last year, who's a guy that is a playmaker. He proved that last year coming in the Super Bowl. He did a good job. I think he had an interception in the Super Bowl where he basically put up the peace sign on Antonio Brown at the end of the game and kind of taunted. Got a penalty at the end of the game, but they have a ton of weapons on that defensive side of the ball, but their strength is that front seven. So as far as our Falcons go, matching up with them, I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the cream of the crop in the NFC South. And on that defensive side of the ball, like I said, the strength is that pass rush and their ability to stop the run. They have great linebackers, Levante David, Devin White. They have guys with great coverage linebackers and great linebackers in space, and they have great pass rush. Like I was stating, the weakness, I believe, an Achilles heel of their team is their corners. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. Those guys are really young. I watched them in college because I am an Auburn Tigers fan. Both of those guys played at Auburn. But both of those guys are solid cornerbacks. But before I continue to go, I've seen a lot more of you have jumped into the chat. So I want to say what's up before I continue to rant on. Asia, what's going on, Miss Asia? One of the queens here at Atlanta Falcons Nation. Shout out to Miss Asia. Tony Wright, what's going on, man? He's always tuning in each and every week to all of our shows, man. We appreciate you. And let's YMOF Jamal. Man, your name is pretty long. YMF Jamal 05. What's going on, man? We appreciate you tuning in. But like I said, you haven't really missed much of anything. I'm just talking about the NFC South, and we're talking about the Buccaneers right now. Ultra Shadow, what's going on, man? And Jamari Williams, what's going on? What's good? Like I'm not gonna even butcher your name, but what's going on, man? He says from South Africa, man. What's good? We look, Atlanta Falcons Nation is worldwide, man. So shout outs to you for joining us from South Africa. But with that being said, like I was stating, the Buccaneers are the cream of the crop. Like I said, on the defensive side of the ball, that defensive line is the strength of their team, and that back end is their weakness on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, they don't have many weaknesses. We all know that Tom Brady, it speaks for itself. He's won 6 Super Bowls and arguably the best quarterback in our division as far as the NFC South goes. We all know some call him the GOAT. I don't call him the GOAT, but he's definitely in the GOAT category, and he's definitely one of those guys that still is playing at a high level. And then when you look at the weapons that they have on offense, they were able to re-sign a guy like Antonio Brown. They were able to bring back Rob Gronkowski at the tight end position. They have O.J. Howard, who played at Alabama at tight end, who's coming back from injury. He was injured last season, but he's coming back from injury. They have Mike Evans, who's just a beast, really good catch radius, very long, fast, runs great routes, and does a great job of high pointing the football. And they also have Scotty Miller, who's one of those guys who's fast in the slot. And he showed against the Green Bay Packers in that NFC Championship game that he's explosive. So they're loaded on offense. They was able to bring back Chris Godwin. I believe they franchise tagged him, if I'm not mistaken. So they were able to bring back the whole crew. So it's going to be real tough. It's going to be really, really tough to compete with those Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. And they are, to me, currently the cream of the crop. They're not unbeatable because football is one of those games where it's any given Sunday, anybody can be beat. And like I said, we're seeing right now in the NBA playoffs, injuries play a factor in what team is going to end up winning the whole shebang or winning the championship. Everything has to line up. All the stars have to align for you to, win a Super Bowl or even repeat as Super Bowl champions or even go back to the Super Bowl. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers definitely have a huge target on their backs. But I do think that they have made a lot of key upgrades. When I went and looked at their roster, not only did they have Leonard Fournette last season, but in the offseason, they brought in Giovanni Bernard, who's a guy that played with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's great at catching the ball out of the backfield, like a James White that played with Tom Brady with the New England Patriots. And they're loaded in the backfield. They brought in C.J. Prosise, who was a running back that played with the Seattle Seahawks. So they're pretty much loaded from top to bottom as far as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go. I really think that to knock them off, it's going to take you're playing your best game, and possibly injuries will play a factor in if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can get back to the Super Bowl or if they're a team that wins our division. But that's enough talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think I've given them too much credit already. But with that being said, I think the next team in the division that I think is next on the totem pole for our Falcons to compete for that NFC South crown is going to be the New Orleans Saints. Like I mentioned, they have won the division the last 3 years in a row. They did a three-peat in the NFC South. Sean Payton, we know his pedigree. He's won a Super Bowl. Now he's starting over with a new quarterback in Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. Personally, I think that Jameis Winston is going to be the guy that's going to eventually be the starter for the New Orleans Saints. But I think that Taysom Hill is going to be a guy that if Jameis Winston, turns into that turnover machine that we know he can be, I really think that we can see Taysom Hill possibly take over at that quarterback position. Personally, I don't believe that Taysom Hill is a guy who you can consistently be a starting quarterback in this league. To me, he reminds me of a Tim Tebow type. He's a little bit more accurate than a Tim Tebow, but last year, if you remember when he played against us, when we faced the Saints, we faced Taysom Hill. He was the starting quarterback at the time. They were a run-heavy offense, and Taysom Hill was basically making short, quick slant pattern, throws. He wasn't throwing the ball down the field 15, 20, 25 yards plus. Sean Payton did a good job of kind of boxing him in and keeping the game plan very simple. Now, if Jameis Winston is the starter, which I believe he will be, I believe that he brings more to the table for the New Orleans Saints. I think that he could be the wild card because we've seen Jameis Winston be one of those guys that pass for 4,000 plus yards. He's a guy that's talent. He has great arm talent, but he just makes bad decisions. So we're going to see if Sean Payton is a guy that can, help Jameis Winston, just kind of like Arthur Smith did with the Ryan Tannehill. We're going to see if he's able to help Jameis Winston change his ways and, keep him from being that gunslinger that we know he is. Personally, I don't see Jameis Winston changing his game. I think you are who you are. I do think he'll play a lot better than he played with Tampa Bay, but I do think that he still will kind of struggle. So I definitely think that, and I see Harrison the Bunny here. So before I go on a little bit further, I see him in the comments. He says Bucks, Saints, Panthers, Falcons. Yeah, that's basically how I feel about the guys that's the teams that's competing against us. That's my order as far as who we should be worried about in this division. In that order, the Bucks, Saints, Panthers, and then I think that the Falcons have a chance to win this division. I think at worst the Falcons will be the second team in the division. If we don't win the division, we're definitely going to be at least a wild card team. But that's the list of how I would have it set up: Bucks, Saints, Panthers, then the Falcons. I agree with that. Now, if you're saying that the Falcons are going to finish fourth in the division, I don't agree with that. But I do think as far as the teams that we're going to have to compete against for that NFC South crown, I think that that's the way that I would have it as well. Bucks, Saints, and then Panthers as far as the threats to us. Jamari Williams says, "Man, Jew, they start for the Saints. Okay, I don't know what you're trying to say right there. First, second, third, and fourth in the division. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to say. I think you're saying the same thing that that Harrison the Bunny said. Let's see. Just got to get turnovers in your division and away games. I completely agree, William Amy. It's going to be very, very important to win your division games. Like we talk about it every year, winning the division. It all starts with winning the division. So I completely agree with you, especially if you want to get one of the top seeds, like the 1 or 2 seed in the NFC. It starts with winning your division. And I think that our division is very winnable. I've stated in numerous videos, whether it was here with the Atlanta Falcons Nation on Kicking It with K-Styles, which we do on Monday nights, just a quick plugger. I do believe that the Falcons can easily sweep the Panthers, sweep the Saints, and I think that we will split with the Bucks because I can't just honestly say that we'll sweep the Bucks because their team, unless, barring injuries, the Bucks are a very talented team, and I don't know if the Falcons, we have the firepower to do it, but the Buccaneers are a very strong team in the NFC. They're one of the strongest teams in the league as far as their roster. They have one of the best rosters in the league. Let's see. Tony Wright says, I believe that the combination of offensive head coach Arthur Smith and Matt Ryan is going to be phenomenal. and league will start talking about them by the beginning of October. And this is a great statement. And I'm kind of glad that you guys have started early. I am going to open it up for Q&A, but this is a great statement by Tony Wright. And being that you put this comment up, Tony Wright, I believe that the Falcons, and you've heard Mad Mike say this as well, and I'm not too sure if K-Styles has said it, but I've heard Mad Mike definitely say it. I really believe that the Falcons need to get off to a fast start. We have to get off to a fast start. For the mere fact that we have a lot of young players on this roster, and the way that you gain confidence is by winning games. Like a lot of these young players that are coming right out of college, like Richie Grant. We have Marlon Davidson, who didn't get a lot of playing time last year. John Kaminsky is still a really young player. AJ Terrell, who's coming into his second season. And pretty much our whole defense is full of young guys, other than the Deron Harmons of the world and Eric Harris and Debo and Foye Aluakon and Grady Jarrett. For the most part, a lot of the guys that we brought in are on the younger side, especially on the in the secondary. And then on the offensive side, you got the guys like Frank Darby. We have a lot of young guys up front, Jalen Mayfield, Matt Hennessy. It's going to be very important for us to get off to a fast start so that these guys will start drinking the Arthur Smith Kool-Aid. Because a lot of the times, if you noticed last season when we started off 0-5, players start to tone out the coach if you're not having success. And, you're listening to the schemes and listening to what the coach is telling you to do. But if it's not working on Sundays and you're losing games and they're not reaping the benefits and they're not seeing the results, players will start to kind of tone out the coaches. So I definitely think that it's going to be very important and imperative that we get off to a fast start for these players to gain confidence, because that's pretty much what happened in 2016. If you remember, the Falcons didn't start off great in 2016. If I'm not mistaken, we started off like 4-3. We were somewhere floating around that 500 mark early in the year, and then we went on like a 7 or 8 game winning streak, and the team just started hitting on all cylinders towards the middle of the year. So I definitely think that was a great point by Tony Wright, that it's going to be imperative that we get off to a very fast start. And I do like this comment as well. It says, share this out to everyone, including all NFC South. I definitely agree with that. Share this content out. Like I said before, if you have come in since I started the show, definitely hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this content out, because we're not just talking about the Falcons in this live video, but we're talking about the state of the NFC South as a whole. So this is a great comment as well. The Nation says, Jew, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight. But with that kind of being said, you guys let me know in the chat as well. What is your order? Who do you think the team that the Falcons is going to have the toughest time with this season? Show me your pecking order. Do you have it Bucks, Saints, Panthers? That's the way that I have it. I feel like the Bucks are public enemy number 1 because they're the defending NFL champions. Then I have the Saints because they're the 3-time. They just three-peated, basically won 3 NFC South titles in a row. And then I had the Panthers coming in as the 3rd team as far as the NFC South crown goes, as far as the threat to the Atlanta Falcons for competing for the NFC South crown. But with that being said, I did kind of want to jump back into what I was stating about the Saints. I didn't really talk about their strengths and their weaknesses, kind of how I did with the Bucks. But as far as it goes, and I like this by Devon. He says Bucks, Falcons, Saints, Panthers. Yeah, I could really see it falling that way as well, Devon. I could easily see either the Falcons or the Bucks. They can flip-flop. I can see either one of those teams winning the division. But I definitely think that that's definitely how it could land. But like I was saying, I want to talk about the Saints as well and their strengths and weaknesses. I talked a little bit about their quarterback position. I do think that that's kind of the wild card and kind of the Achilles heel, because you lose a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famer and Drew Brees coming in. I really think that it's, they're in a flux right now. They're in transition. So I definitely think that it's going to be tough, and that's going to be one of the Achilles heels for the Saints. But I definitely think that on the offensive side, the strength of the New Orleans Saints is the offensive line. And we seen today Ryan Ramczyk They made him the highest paid right tackle in the league. He signed a 5-year, $90 million contract. So I definitely think that on the Saints side of things, the strength of the Saints team is going to be the running game, and it's going to be the offensive line. I feel like the Achilles heel right now, or the question mark on that Saints team or that roster, is the quarterback position. Nobody knows how well Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill is possibly going to play. And Drew Brees have been a staple for that team, just like Matt Ryan's been a staple for our Falcons over the last decade plus. So I definitely think that the strength, they're going to have to rely on Alvin Kamara in the passing game and in the running game. Latavius Murray, that's the strength of that Saints team. The Achilles heel right now is that offensive line and playmakers outside of Michael Thomas in the wide receiver position, because the Saints were a team kind of like the Falcons that lost a lot of players in free agency. They didn't have the money. They were in cap hell because they kept renewing Drew Brees' contract. They kind of did what Thomas Dimitroff did, where they kept restructuring contracts and things of that nature, to the point where they didn't have any money and they were kind of in cap hell, and they lost a lot of key pieces. Like I said, they lost Emmanuel Sanders, who were their second receiver on the opposite side of Michael Thomas. Now they're going to have to rely on guys like Callaway that they brought in 2 years ago. They're going to have to rely on the kid out of UCF. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he's been on their team for about 2 or 3 years. They're going to have to rely on him. And they're going to have to rely on the kick returner that they have on their team as well, who's kind of like a scat. He's kind of like a Scotty Miller, Taylor Gabriel type. I can't think of his name at the moment as well, but he's one of those guys that does the punt returns and things of that nature. I think his name is Tommy Lee Lewis, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to have to rely on guys like that and rely on Sean Payton's ability to scheme guys open, because they don't have a lot of weapons outside of Michael Thomas in the passing game. So I think they're going to struggle on the passing side of things, but I think that they have a great offensive line. They have a great running game, and they're going to have to rely on Alvin Kamara, those yak yardage after catches. Him and Latavius Murray are going to have to be, they're going to have some heavy lifting on the offensive side of the ball. But as far as the defensive side of the ball, when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, I think the weakness of the Saints defense is the secondary. The secondary and their linebackers as far as coverage. I feel like their Achilles heel has always been the secondary, whether it's whoever's playing opposite of Lattimore. Lattimore is a pretty solid corner. As much as we hate Marshawn Lattimore, he always goes head up. Him and Julio Jones will go at it at times. He's one of those guys that clutches and holds and grabs, but he's a solid cornerback. But opposite him, they lost Janoris Jenkins, who was a veteran guy. And I definitely think that that's going to really hurt them far as having multiple corners that can cover. They have a guy like Ken Crawley, who they've had for years. A guy like PJ Williams. Those guys really struggle in coverage, especially man-to-man coverage. And their defensive coordinator likes to blitz a lot. So I really think that they're going to struggle. They were able to bring back Marcus Williams, who's their safety, and he's a pretty solid safety. But they don't have a lot of, they don't have a lot of depth at cornerback. So I really think that they're going to struggle against our Atlanta Falcons because, we have those matchup nightmares like Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst, Calvin Ridley. They're going to have their hands full. Russell Gage, Frank Darby, and the list goes on and on. It's going to be really, really hard for those guys on that secondary for the Saints. I really think that that's the Achilles heel for them. As far as the strength of the New Orleans Saints, it's that front seven. It's always been that front seven. They're great at stopping the run. Last year, I believe they was #1 in stopping the run. Demario Davis is a thumper. He's one of those guys at that middle linebacker that he doesn't cover well, but he's an old school 1980s, 1990s linebacker. He doesn't have, great coverage skills, but he's a guy that's a hammer. He's going to come downhill, and he's great at stopping the run and filling gaps and things of that nature. They do a great job of that with pretty much all of the linebackers that they have there in New Orleans. I just think that they're going to struggle because they lost a lot of guys on the defensive side and the offensive side. They lost their leading pass rusher or their leading sack. Their sack leader last year. He went to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I can't think of his name at the moment. He wore number 91. Can't think of his name at the moment, but Cam Jordan, he played opposite of Cam Jordan last year, and he led their team in sacks, and he ended up getting a big contract to sign with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think his name is Trey Hendrickson. Now that I think of it, Trey Hendrickson is the guy I'm thinking of. He was the leading sack getter over there for the New Orleans Saints last year, and he signed a big contract with the Cincinnati Bengals, and they lost. They lost him, and he did a great job opposite of Cameron Hayward. We know that Cam Hayward is one of the best pass rushers in the game, but he's kind of, he sees double teams, triple teams, kind of like a Grady Jarrett, where he needs a partner, and he doesn't have that guy on the opposite side of him. So I really can see even their pass rush taking a step back. They're always good in stopping the run, but when it comes to pass rush, I think they're going to struggle because a guy like Marcus Davenport, who they drafted a couple years ago, he's kind of been a bust for them. He hasn't panned out, hasn't developed. So I really think that they're going to struggle at that other defensive end position, because Trey Hendrickson, I think, is a guy that kind of got overlooked last year, but he was one of those guys that played with a hot motor, a very high motor, and was one of the better players for the Saints last year. But with that being said, we all know, the Saints are a division rival. I definitely think that because they have great coaching over there in New Orleans, I don't expect them to fall off too much. I do think that they're a team that'll compete. They could split with us, and win a game or two. We could easily win our home game and they win their home game. But I do believe the Falcons have a better chance of sweeping the Saints than they would have a chance of sweeping the Buccaneers, because the Buccaneers, to me, like I said, are the cream of the crop. And to me, they have the most weapons in this division. They're the most complete team from top to bottom in the division. I could see the Falcons sweeping the Saints, depending on if we're, rolling at that point, depending on how fast our team grasps the concept, the new concepts on offense and defense. We could definitely, sweep the Saints this year. But I do want to jump into a couple more of you guys' comments. And I know I missed some of you guys' comments, so I'm going to scroll back up here. Let's see. Ultra Shadow says the man Brady is going to be 44 in August. Father Time's going to catch up to him at some point. And I completely agree with you. Hopefully it's this year where, Father Time catches up to him. To be honest with you, last year we seen Tom Brady throwing ducks and things of that nature. I do feel like, Tom Brady has lost some arm strength. I do think that Tom Brady is not playing at the top of his game anymore. I do believe he has it between the ears, and he's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the game. He's seen every defense you can throw at him, and he still, knows every trick to the trade. But I do believe that Tom Brady has kind of fell off a little bit when it comes to arm strength, when it comes to him standing in the pocket and feeling pressure. If you notice the last couple seasons, since he's gotten older and hit his 40s, he's a quarterback that's gun shy. Most of the time, he's not going to stand in there and take a big hit. If he feels the pressure, if he feels that pocket collapsing, a lot of the times, if you push that pocket, Tom Brady's a guy that's just going to go down. He's not going to allow you to tee off on him. So I definitely think that Father Time is already catching up to Tom Brady, but he still shows that, he still has other ways that he can get the job done. But I definitely think that Tom Brady is going to have a rough year. And I definitely think that we can see, Tom Brady's numbers dip. But to be honest, as well, and Isaac put a good comment up here by saying Brady struggles against the blitz. He does struggle against the blitz, and I feel like that's pretty much every quarterback. Even though Matt Ryan has great numbers against the blitz, no quarterback likes to get blitzed. No quarterback likes pressure on them. Quarterbacks want to feel, safe and secure in the pocket and feel, be able to step into their throws and things of that nature. So I feel like that's pretty much every quarterback, but Brady does struggle against the blitz. But I think that they do a good job. Byron Leftwich, Bruce Arians, they do a good job of not putting Tom Brady in bad situations. If you watch a lot of the Tampa Bay games last year, and even when he was in New England, Tom Brady gets the ball out his hands fast. Like he gets the ball out and gets it into his playmakers' hands. He doesn't sit there and hold on to the ball and do these long, drawn out 5 and 7 step drops. I think that Byron Leftwich did a good job of balancing out that passing and that running game. We've seen in the Super Bowl and in the playoffs that a guy like Leonard Fournette that they brought in played a huge factor in them winning that Super Bowl last year. So that's a great comment, Isaac. I definitely agree with you that no quarterback likes to be under pressure. But if you're going to beat Tom Brady, you definitely have to pressure him. And I think a guy like Dean Pease coming in, that was a great pickup for Atlanta Falcons because he's coached against Tom Brady, even up down to the nitty gritty as far as practice. He was the defensive coordinator in New England. So he's seen Tom Brady up close and personal, and he's seen Tom Brady as an opponent when he was coaching the Ravens, when he was coaching the Titans. If you remember, Dean Pease was on that coaching staff that eliminated the Patriots and Tom Brady a couple years back. So Dean Pease is definitely a guy that's a great defensive coordinator, very aggressive. And I definitely think that he's going to be one of those guys that's going to bring pressure from everywhere and make Tom Brady and a lot of quarterbacks uncomfortable. But I do want to jump into a couple more of you guys' comments as well as talk really quick about the Carolina Panthers, last but not least. Before I say that, I want to say what's up to the homie Jumpman T with the comment. He said the silent assassin on the mic. I appreciate it, man. Twisted Torch TV, man. Y'all make sure y'all go over to his channel. He is a part of the Atlanta Falcons Nation family. Go over and hit that like, share, subscribe button on his channel. He's on the road to 1K as well. So definitely go over and do us that favor and go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button in, there. He has great content as well. But with that being said, I do want to talk really quick about the Carolina Panthers. And they're the third team in the totem pole when it comes to the teams that we're going to have to battle for the NFC South crown. The Panthers are kind of in a rebuild mode. They started their rebuild mode last year when they got a whole new head coach. They brought in Matt Rule from the college ranks from the University of Temple, and they brought in Joe Brady, who was the offensive coordinator for the LSU Tigers. And last year was their first year in Carolina. I believe they finished, if I'm not mistaken, 7-9, if I'm not mistaken. But it was either 7-9 or 6-10. But they had a pretty good season for it to be their first year coaching that Panthers team. And I do think that the Carolina Panthers are going to be a team that's going to be able to compete in our division. Like I said, last year, they were a team that split with us. They did beat us in Atlanta that first game, and then we beat them in Carolina on that Thursday night football game. But they had a guy like Mike Davis, who we brought over from Carolina. We all know pretty much the strengths of their team. The strengths of the Carolina Panthers team is Christian McCaffrey. Pretty much that team goes as Christian McCaffrey goes. And last year, Christian McCaffrey went down with a season-ending injury. Pretty much couldn't get healthy or stay healthy all season. And that was pretty much their season because Christian McCaffrey is pretty much 85 to 90% of their offense. They throw the ball to Christian McCaffrey. They run the ball with Christian McCaffrey. He's the public enemy number one on that team. That's definitely, the strength of their team is that running game. I do think that they did a solid job as well in the draft. They brought in Chuba Hubbard, who's the running back that played at Oklahoma State. He's a guy that's built kind of like a Christian McCaffrey, a speedster, a guy who, if he hits a crease, he can take it the distance. And he's a guy that I wanted our Atlanta Falcons to look at in the draft. We decided to go with Javion Hawkins, who's a pretty much similar to him, a scat back, a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield, and a guy that's really fast. So I definitely think that the Carolina Panthers running game and Chuba Hubbard, that was a good pickup for them. They picked up Terrence Marshall, the wide receiver out of LSU. He was coached by a guy like Joe Brady as well. So I definitely think that Terrence Marshall is one of those guys who's a guy that's long, I think he's like 6'3", fast and can high point the football, is a guy who has great catch radius, similar to a Mike Evans type. He's one of those guys. He's not as good as Mike Evans when it comes to route running, but as far as his size and his length, he's a guy that's really lanky and can make plays if you just throw the ball up to him in one-on-one situations. So I definitely can see a guy like Terrence Marshall being one of those guys that they drafted that can help on that offensive side of the ball. Joe Brady is a very creative offensive coordinator, one of the younger offensive minds in the NFL coming over from the college ranks. But I like what they did in the draft. They brought in Deontay Brown. He's the offensive guard, and he goes about 6'4", 350 pounds. He played at Alabama, and he's one of those guys that's he was one of the best pass blockers on the collegiate ranks the last couple years. He was a guy that I wanted the Falcons to take a look at in this draft, but they did a good job of trying to solidify that offensive line, because last year their offensive line was the Achilles heel for their team. And I do think that they did a good job of trying to bolster their offensive line where it won't be the Achilles heel of their team this year. Now, the weakness on the offensive side of the ball for Carolina, I believe the weakness for them will be the quarterback position, similar to the Saints, because they brought over Sam Darnold from the New York Jets, and he's a guy that was he was a number 1 draft pick, but he was a first rounder that was taken by the Jets out of USC a couple years ago, and he never really lived up to the hype coming out of college. I don't want to put all of that on him, because I do believe a lot of his struggles was due to the poor coaching. Adam Gase, the head coach, former head coach and offensive coordinator of the Jets, was a train wreck. And I do believe that anybody would struggle with a coach like Adam Gase. He's not a great coach when it comes down to NFL football in general. To me, he's not one of the better coaches in the league. To me, he's one of the worst coaches in the league. So I really think that kind of factored into some of the regression we've seen out of Sam Darnold. So I think that it's good that he has a fresh start there in Carolina. And we're going to see what Sam Darnold can bring to the table. I do think that Sam Darnold is a guy that can throw with anticipation. He has weapons like Robbie Anderson, who played with him with the New York Jets. So they do have some chemistry there. Robbie Anderson is one of those guys that can get behind the defense with his speed. And they have a ton of weapons. They did lose Curtis Samuel, who was another wide receiver / running back that they had, who was explosive. They lost him in free agency to the Washington football team. But I do think everything starts and finishes with that running game there on the offensive side of the ball. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I'll say for the Carolina Panthers, the strength of that defense is the front seven. Derek Brown, Brian Burns on the edge, to me, is on the brink of being a Pro Bowl defensive end. They brought in Gross Matos last year from the University of Penn State, and I think that he could definitely be a guy that can continue to develop. We don't know what he is yet, but they have a lot of weapons over there, young weapons on that defensive side of the ball. Jeremy Chin is a guy that they drafted to be a safety that they switched over to a hybrid linebacker, and he was a guy that I liked out of college. I wanted the Falcons to bring him in, but we didn't go with him. We didn't draft him. The Panthers drafted him, and he's one of those guys as well that I think is a playmaker. He's great in coverage as a linebacker. He struggled at safety, so they decided to move him to that linebacker role. But I definitely think that the front seven of that Panthers team is very, very dangerous. Now, as far as the secondary, I see him saying the Panthers secondary silently dangerous. I definitely think that the Panthers, as far as the secondary, we talked about this a couple of nights ago. Tony Wright was one of those guys that kept mentioning the Carolina Panthers. So if the Carolina Panthers have a great season, we definitely can say that Tony Wright said it first. But he talked about it a couple of nights ago. He asked a question about the Panthers, and he was basically stating that they have a really good secondary, or they have an up-and-coming secondary with guys like Joe Horn's son that they brought in out of the University of South Carolina. He was, to me, was my top cornerback in this draft. And they do have on the other side of him Dante Jackson that they brought in from LSU. But I don't really think that their secondary is going to be that great this season. I think that those guys need a chance to develop. And I talked about that a little bit on Monday night with Kicking It with K-Styles. I do think that the Panthers have a chance at being better on that in that secondary and developing. But I think right now they're really, really young on that secondary, and those guys are going to need time to develop. J.C. Horn is one of those guys that I think could be a top corner in this game, but I think that it's going to take him some time to become more polished. To me, he's sometimes a little bit too aggressive, and he may get called for penalties and things of that nature on the next level in the NFL. So it's going to take him time to adjust to the speed. Similar to a guy like, I definitely think that guys like Dante Jackson he's a solid corner. I don't think he's as great as a lot of people think. He's just a really fast corner. He ran like a 4.3 in the combine. He is a really quick guy, but he's a guy that falls down a lot. If you go and watch a lot of the games that we had against the Carolina Panthers last season, the 2 games that we had, Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones had their way with Dante Jackson. So I don't fear a guy like Dante Jackson. I do think that he has elite speed, but I'm not, I don't fear a guy like Dante Jackson. And I think on the in the secondary, as far as their safeties go, they're really young at that safety position. They don't have great safeties, and they don't have a great secondary. To me personally, I think they have a chance to continue to develop. But right now, I think the secondary for the Carolina Panthers, I would say right now is the weakness of that team. That and the linebackers. The linebackers are not great in coverage there at Carolina. I think that Shaq Thompson is a great run stopping linebacker, similar to the Saints linebackers. He's good at coming down and being a thumper, but he struggles in coverage, and I think that's the reason that they're going to struggle against our Atlanta Falcons as far as it goes. Far as tight ends, Thompson have to cover our tight ends. He's going to struggle against Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst, and a lot of the athletic tight ends in the game, and a lot of the athletic running backs in the game. I think they're going to struggle, and they have struggled since they lost a guy like Luke Kuechly. So I definitely think, the strength, like I said, for the Carolina Panthers is no surprise. It's that running game. The weakness or Achilles heel is going to be the passing game, because we don't know what Sam Darnold is yet. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think their strength is stopping the run and putting pressure on the passer, because Brian Burns is one of those guys that's one of the youngest guys in the game. But he's an up and coming Pro Bowler. I think that Brian Burns in the next couple of years is going to be a Pro Bowler. But with that being said, that's pretty much what I feel about the NFC South. I have the ranks as far as teams competing for the NFC South crown, or the biggest threat to the Atlanta Falcons is the defending champ Buccaneers. The Saints are the number 2 team as far as the next biggest threat. And then the Carolina Panthers is that 3rd team, I think, to compete for that NFC South crown against our Atlanta Falcons. But with that being said, I am going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and take you guys' questions. I appreciate you guys bearing with me, with me ranting and things of that nature. But at this point, I do want to take you guys' questions. So you guys go ahead and drop your questions in the box. And a great point by William Amy. I did notice that today when I went and looked at the roster for the Carolina Panthers, I didn't realize that they signed A.J. Boye. That was a sneaky signing by the Carolina Panthers. A.J. Boye is a guy who was a dangerous cornerback, was one of the better cornerbacks when he played with the Texans and when he played with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I believe last year he played with the Denver Broncos, if I'm not mistaken. But over the last couple years, he's kind of dipped off. His play has kind of dipped a little bit. When he was in Jacksonville playing on the opposite side of Jalen Ramsey, he was one of the better corners in the game. And when he was originally with the Houston Texans, he was one of the better young corners in the game. He is a veteran corner, and I think he can be one of those guys to help J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson come along. So that was a good signing by them. But I'm not too sure how much A.J. Boye has in the tank, because it seems like over the last couple of years, his play has dipped a little bit. But this is a great question by Jamari Williams. He says, Jew, have you seen the top 10 quarterbacks list? I was going to do a video on this, but since you brought it up, this is a great question. I have seen the quarterbacks list, that top 10. I think he's talking about Pro Football Focus top 10 quarterback list, if I'm not mistaken. I believe they had Matt Ryan as the 7th quarterback on that list as far as the top 10 quarterbacks go. And I had a huge problem with the list. The problem that I had with the list, the top 5 quarterbacks I believe that they had, I had no problems with them putting those quarterbacks in front of Matt Ryan. I believe they had Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson. I don't have the list here in front of me. Josh Allen. And then I think it was Dak Prescott, if I'm not mistaken. Those were the guys that they had ahead of Matt Ryan. And I had a huge bone to pick with PFF, or Pro Football Focus. I'm not a huge fan of PFF. And give me a second, y'all. So I'm not a huge fan of Pro Football Focus. But I did see the top 10 list, and they had Matt Ryan, I think, as number 7. I think Matt Ryan should have been in the top 5. I would have moved. I would have put Matt Ryan ahead of Dak Prescott, who I think they had at number 6. And I would have put Matt Ryan ahead of Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills, who was at number 5. The reason I say that is because Josh Allen only had one good season. He hasn't been consistent in the NFL. Last year, he did have a really good season. But if you remember when Josh Allen first came in the league, he was completing less than 50% of his passes. If you go look at his completion percentage, he struggled his first 2 years in the league as far as accuracy and things of that nature. And, turning the ball over, that was something that Josh Allen struggled with originally coming into the league. And he cleaned a lot of that up last year. And he did a good job last year of leading the Buffalo Bills to the AFC Championship game. So I definitely think that Josh Allen is on his way. But when you come out with the top 10 list, I think you have to look at consistency. That's what I base off of when I'm doing a list of who's the best quarterbacks in the game. As far as I'm concerned, Dak Prescott hasn't done anything in his career. And you see Devon say they had Dak Prescott over Matt Ryan. Where did they do that at? Exactly. That's what I said when I saw the list as well. I was furious when I saw the list as well. And I was like, really? And Jamari Williams, you did make a good point as well. He says, Pat Mahomes. Yeah, Pat Mahomes. I forgot about Pat Mahomes as well. He was ahead of Matt Ryan as well. I think we all know that Pat Mahomes is probably, I think he was number 1 on that list, number 1 or 2. But I had no problem with Pat Mahomes, being ahead of Matt Ryan. But guys like Dak Prescott, who's never played in an NFC Championship game, never won an MVP, never won an Offensive Player of the Year award, I don't think you can put guys like Dak Prescott and guys like Josh Allen ahead of a guy like Matt Ryan, who's a veteran. Pretty much, Matt Ryan is one of those guys that at this point is an elite quarterback. He has all of the accolades you can have as a quarterback. I don't understand why Matt Ryan continues to get disrespected, by the media. But, beyond popular belief, Matt Ryan is one of those guys that is a great quarterback, an elite quarterback. Definitely, like I said, should have been top 5 on that list or top 6 on that list. But those guys that I mentioned, Dak Prescott, definitely shouldn't have been ahead of Matt Ryan. And a guy like Josh Allen, who's only had one good year, where you have a guy like Matt Ryan, who's been consistent, has thrown for over 4,000 yards for 10 straight seasons, which has never been done by any other quarterback. I think besides Drew Brees, if I'm not mistaken. Matt Ryan is definitely first ballot Hall of Famer, and definitely one of those guys that I think you have to put ahead of these young bucks that you have in the game. And even another guy that I would like to see on that list that wasn't in that top 10, and I would put him ahead of Josh Allen, and I would put him ahead of Dak Prescott, is Deshaun Watson. I think that Deshaun Watson is one of those guys who kind of suffered what Matt Ryan suffered from last year. Mike talked about this in our last show as well. Last year, he led the league in passing. Deshaun Watson led the league in passing and only went 4-12. The Texans went 4-12. wasn't any fault of Deshaun Watson for them finishing 4-12, but they got rid of his best weapon in D Hop, who went on and was traded to the Arizona Cardinals, and they pretty much got rid of all of Deshaun Watson's weapons on the offensive side of the football. So Deshaun Watson proved 2 years ago when he got the Houston Texans to the AFC Championship game and had a 24-point lead or 21-point lead against the Kansas City Chiefs before they came back in that AFC Championship game. I mean, Deshaun Watson has shown you that he can carry a franchise, and he's one of the better quarterbacks, young quarterbacks in the game. And that's the reason why they gave him that huge contract they gave him. So I definitely had a huge bone to pick, and I thank you for that you mentioned in that question, Jamari. I definitely think that Pro Football Focus is tripping. And this is obvious. Jabari Williams said, do you think Matt Ryan's underrated? Most definitely. Most definitely. Let's see. Bruce Wayne says, what's cracking, Jew? Any player that plays for ATL will always get negative to little attention simply because the narrative the media wants Atlanta sports to have. And I completely agree with this statement by Bruce Wayne as well. I definitely think that the media plays a huge role in why our players don't get, the respect that they deserve. Even when we went to the championship, in 2016, they didn't give us a shot at winning that Super Bowl. They didn't give us any respect going into that season in 2016. They didn't believe that the Falcons would win, but maybe 5 or 6 games that season, and we end up going 11-5. So that just goes to show you, they disrespect pretty much all of our players in Atlanta. Even the great players that we've had, the Roddy Whites of the world, never got the credit he deserved. Even Julio Jones, now that he's going on to the Tennessee Titans, Julio Jones has, been disrespected for years. If you even just look at the Madden ratings, when the Madden ratings come out every year, they have players that are on the 99 team where they're like the best players on Madden. And Julio Jones was one of those guys that never had that 99 rating on the game. They had guys like Michael Thomas, guys like D Hop, all these guys where Julio Jones pretty much laid the foundation for those guys and pretty much have been the best wide receiver the last decade. Matt Ryan talked about that in his farewell to Julio Jones. He thanked Julio Jones for being, and basically he said that Julio Jones had the most impact on his career. And I pretty much think that Julio Jones has definitely been the best wide receiver the last decade, but he never gets the credit that he deserves. It's always guys like Antonio Brown that got the credit, got the 99 ratings on Madden and things of that nature, got the credit from the media because he was on the Steelers, which is pretty much a bigger market when it comes to having, a winning background and things of that nature. You had players like Dez Bryant, a part of the Dallas Cowboys. At one point, they were debating who was better between him and Julio Jones. Dez Bryant, it was people debating who was better, D Hop or Julio Jones. Odell Beckham was another guy that kind of fell off a little bit, but when he was with the Giants, he was another guy that they were trying to compare to Julio Jones and were saying that he was better than Julio. So Julio Jones has stood the test of time, and I completely agree. Most of our Atlanta Falcons players don't get the credit that they deserve. Players like Grady Jarrett, players like Matt Ryan, Julio, Roddy White. Even when Tony Gonzalez was in Atlanta, he didn't get a ton of respect. They gave him more credit when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs, but he didn't get the respect when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. He kind of was overlooked as well. And even guys like Todd McClure, who was a great center for our Atlanta Falcons. I mean, the list goes on and on. Deion Jones, who to me currently is a top 3 linebacker in the NFL. He's another guy that gets overlooked and doesn't get a lot of credit. Everybody always talks about Bobby Wagner because he was a part of that Legion of Boom defense there in Seattle. But I put Deion Jones right up there. For my money, I'll put Deion Jones up there with any of those top linebackers in the game. And I think he measures up really well. You had a guy like Brian Urlacher come out and basically state that Deion Jones was a bad mother, you know what? So bad mother, shut your mouth. So you already know that Deion Jones is one of those guys. And the media, the Atlanta media and ESPN and all of the, these outlets, they do a poor job of, highlighting our Atlanta Falcons. It's only when the Falcons are struggling that we're highlighted and they talk about us. When the Julio Jones trade rumors and things of that nature, any negative thing when it comes to Atlanta sports, usually that's what they highlight. They don't talk about, the success that we have had, and they don't talk about the great players that we've had. Jamal Anderson, the list goes on and on. But let's see here. And this is a great point by Eric McDowell. He says, out of 13 seasons, Matt Ryan only has 3 bad seasons. And I completely agree. Matt Ryan has been the model, of consistency. He's a guy, like I said, anybody that can pass for over 4,000 yards, 10 straight seasons, and you're having, new offensive coordinators going in and out for the last, 13 years. He's had 5, 6, different offensive coordinators in his career, 3 different head coaches, if I'm not mistaken, in his career. And Matt Ryan has been one of those guys that always completes anywhere around 65 to 66%, 65 to 66% of his passes as far as his completion percentage. And he's always a guy that pretty much has a great touchdown to interception ratio. He's not a guy that turns the ball over a lot when it comes to interceptions and fumbles and things of that nature. He does a great job of protecting the football. So I definitely think that Matt Ryan is a guy that has been a model consistency, one of the best and greatest quarterbacks of all time. And when it's all said and done, Matt Ryan is going to go back or go down as one of the best quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. And when my kids have kids, and I'm old and gray, Matt Ryan is going to be one of those guys that's going to be in the history books in the NFL, that they're going to talk about on NFL films and NFL classics and things of that nature. He's going to be a guy, that they're going to talk about for a really long time. They already have one of Matt Ryan's jerseys. I believe it was his jersey and his glove they took last year, and I think his cleats as well, from him passing Peyton Manning, for throwing for the most yardage in the first 13 years of NFL career or something like that. So Matt Ryan is definitely a special quarterback, and I definitely think that we need to soak up the greatness while we have it, cheer him on while we have him, because once he, leaves the franchise and retires, he's definitely going to be a guy that, we're going to miss. But let's see here. And Tony Wright says John Abraham was disrespected. I definitely think that John Abraham was another one of those guys that was one of the best pass rushers in the game as well for many, many years. And I completely agree with that as well. I definitely agree with you on that. John Abraham is probably be one of the greatest pass rushers in NFL history. One of those guys that has 100 plus sacks in his career, and definitely was one of those guys that broke barriers for our Atlanta Falcons franchise as far as pass rush. I think he probably will go down right now as the best pass rusher to ever play in Atlanta. If we look at the defensive ends that we've had here and outside linebackers that we've had here, to me, John Abraham definitely was the best, the best pass rusher that we've had. And I want to get to this question here. It says, how will you feel about rookie Richie Grant? I think he's going to be solid. Nobody really talking about him. Well, we've talked about him here on Atlanta Falcons Nation. I don't know if you've tuned into our shows, but as far as the media, of course, they don't talk about any of our rookies other than Kyle Pitts. They really don't talk about anybody else. But I definitely think that Richie Grant will have a huge impact on this Atlanta Falcons defense and on this Atlanta Falcons team. I do think that he can be a guy that gets multiple contracts with our Atlanta Falcons, definitely can be a staple of our defense. Be that Honey Badger, be that Earl Thomas of the defense, be that somebody compare him to Brian Dawkins. I think he's a little bit better in coverage than a guy like Brian Dawkins, but he does play with the physicality of a Brian Dawkins. So I definitely think that Richie Grant was one of my favorite players in this draft class. Definitely had him high on my list. It was out of him and Andre Cisco. Those were the two guys that I had on my draft board circled for our Atlanta Falcons. And we went with a guy like Richie Grant, which I think he's going to be great in coverage. A great guy who can roam around the field. You can move him around like a chess piece. He's a guy similar to Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu. He has the ability to be that great if he studies the film and if he reaches his potential, reaches his ceiling. I definitely think the sky's the limit for a guy like Richie Grant. I definitely could see him, being one of the leaders of this Atlanta Falcons defense for a really, really long time. But let's see here. And that's a great point too. Devon says Devontae Adams gets 99 or no. I definitely think that Devontae Adams is a guy. He gets more respect than a guy like Julio when it comes to the Madden ratings and things of that nature. To me, Julio Jones has always been slighted. Like how do you be in the league 10 plus years? He's been in the league 10 plus years and never has had that 99 rating on the game. And you have guys that are still wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac, step into the game or step onto the game and, are 99 ratings overnight. Like, to me, no disrespect to a guy like D-Hop. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is one of the better wide receivers in the league, but to me, he's not better than Julio Jones. He doesn't have the speed of a Julio Jones. He has great hands, and I think his hands are up there with Julio Jones as far as catching the ball in traffic. D-Hop doesn't drop a lot of passes, but I don't think that he runs the routes that Julio Jones runs. Julio Jones runs arguably the best route, arguably a top 5 route runner in the game, and arguably one of the fastest wide receivers for his size in the game. The way that he goes in and out of his breaks and comes in and out of his breaks, he comes out of his breaks like a smaller player, and that's not something that D-Hop does well. D-Hop is not a great route runner. D-Hop just has great hands. He does a great job at catching the football. But if you watch D-Hop play, he doesn't get a lot of separation on his routes. A lot of the times, DeAndre Hopkins is catching the ball in traffic, but he has very strong hands. So at the point of attack, D-Hop is one of the best in the game at catching the ball with players draped all over him. Like if you go back to that game last year where he caught the Hail Mary, that it shows how strong his hands is. For him to be catch the ball at his highest point with 4 or 5 guys around him and to be able to pull the ball down, that it shows how strong his hands were with guys draped all over him. But as far as, the complete package, route running, hands, speed, vertical, and then just your body being a physical specimen, I think that Julio Jones is number one when it comes to being a complete wide receiver. But I definitely agree. I think Devontae Adams, because he plays with the Packers, who is a well-known franchise, they're one of the, golden franchises of the NFL. He gets a lot of credit, even though I think that Devontae Adams deserves the credit that he gets, because Devontae Adams is another guy that I think is a better route runner than a guy like Hopkins. Devontae Adams is a top 5 wide receiver in the game as well. He's right up there with Julio, right up there with DeAndre Hopkins. Let's see here. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. Devon says, what are your thoughts on Pitt's $32 million contract? I love it. He's under contract for the next possibly 5 years, which gives our Falcons a chance to compete for a Super Bowl before he gets a new contract. And it's going to be imperative that the Falcons win a Super Bowl while we have some of these guys on rookie deals. I talked about it in 2016. One of the biggest problems that we had in 2016 was we got to the Super Bowl. We had a ton of guys on rookie contracts, which was great, but we didn't finish the job in the Super Bowl. We allowed the Patriots to come back in that game and steal that Super Bowl, and we lost a lot of players. Mike talked about a couple weeks ago, or maybe even a month ago, where we had to let a lot of guys go because Julio Jones wanted that huge contract. We gave him that $66 million guaranteed. A lot of those weapons that we had on that 2016 team either had to be, walk-in free agency, or we had to pay those guys. Like we paid Deion Jones, we paid Grady Jarrett. All of those guys was on rookie deals in that 2016 year. We paid Julio. We gave Matt Ryan a new contract. We paid Devontae Freeman. So a lot of those guys that were, on those smaller contracts were still under rookie deals. When we made that Super Bowl run, we were able to draft correctly, and we were able to basically get cheap labor off of some of those guys that were later draft picks, like a Devondre Campbell, like Grady Jarrett, like Deion Jones. All of those guys were rookies. A guy like Keanu Neal, who had a huge impact on that 2016 team and 2017 team. All of those guys were on cheap deals on those rookie contracts. So I definitely think that was huge as well. And Miss Maggie T, I appreciate that. She says, super chat and cash app your boy some support. I appreciate that, Miss Maggie. And I see we have a super chat, $5 super chat. With that being said, we had to give y'all the victory bell, as we have in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. They had a train horn when we scored a touchdown. But this year, if you don't know, if you haven't seen the Atlanta Falcons victory bell, this is it. So the Atlanta Falcons victory bell, I hope to see that a lot this upcoming season. But I'm definitely looking forward to ringing that bell after games this year. If you don't know, we do the post-game shows and things of that nature after the games. So I expect to see that bell a lot. But we also do that when we get a super chat here at Jew Talk Sports, or here on What's the Word Dirty Bird. So if you put a super chat or a cash app, you let us know, when it pops up. We'll definitely ring the victory bell, or ring that cowbell, the victory bell here at Atlanta Falcons Nation, Jew Talk Sports. But I appreciate the $5 super chat. She said spitting facts. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate Maggie T for dropping that in the chat. Please hit that like button. Please share out this content. If you join me before I had mentioned that earlier, if you recently joined, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for your boy, not just here at Jew Talk Sports, but also at Atlanta Falcons Nation. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. We're looking to get to 2,000 subscribers before this season kicks off. I'm about 800 away from 2,000. I believe I'm like at 1,200 and some. And I believe Atlanta Falcons Nation at this point is somewhere around 1,500 and some, if I'm not mistaken. So help us get to 2,000 subscribers, and help Miss Maggie T get to 1,000 subscribers as well. But I see my boy in the building, Just K Styles. He said that's what I was waiting on, victory bell. Most definitely. Like, hopefully we see this victory bell a lot this year, not just from the super chats, but from us getting the win. From every win, we're gonna definitely have the victory bell after every win in the post game show. But with that being said, you guys continue to drop your questions. If you have any more questions, I'll probably be up here for maybe another, say, 15, 20 minutes if you guys have more questions. And I'm gonna scroll up because I might have missed some of you guys' questions as well. And Tony Wright's bringing all of the questions. Let's see. Tony Wright says Slant Thomas is top 15, not top 10, and certainly not top 5. I agree with that. He's not top 5. He possibly will fall somewhere in the top 10 range, depending on what players you have. I'm not going to sit here and go through or name 10 wide receivers, but I think he's somewhere in that 10-ish range. Mike Thomas last year had a bad ankle injury, so his numbers kind of dipped last year without Drew Brees playing in a lot of those games, and him being on the injured list for a huge part of the year due to that high ankle sprain. But I do think that Michael Thomas is similar to a Hopkins. He's similar to D-Hop. Both of those guys are not burners. They're not going to beat you with speed. Both of those guys are just have strong hands. Like, they're physical. They're physical wide receivers. Possession wide receivers is what I call them. Similar to like a Mohamed Sanu type was to a lesser degree. Mohamed Sanu was similar to Mike Thomas, similar to DeAndre Hopkins. I don't believe that Mohamed Sanu is on their level, but he was just a physical specimen as far as physical at the point of attack, a guy you can put in a slot, or a guy that can run a slant pattern, not afraid to take the big hit across the middle. And one of those guys is just physically imposing, and a guy that has strong hands. If you guys remember when Mohamed Sanu was here, his strengths was, being able to catch the ball in traffic. And that's why he was a clutch player in the red zone. And he was a clutch player on third down, because you could put him in the slot. He ran great routes. He was a physical body. So if you threw the ball across the middle, he wasn't afraid to take big hits from corners and safeties, because he had that big frame. So I definitely think Mike Thomas is somewhere in the top 10. He's not top 5, I don't think, anymore. I think he just got a lot of targets, and a lot of people kind of overrated him because he had that one season where he caught like 180 balls or something like that. But other than that, I don't think that Mike Thomas is up there, with the Julio Joneses, with the D Hops. I think that those guys are a little bit better than a Mike Thomas, but I do think that Mike Thomas is top 10. I'm not going to disrespect the man like that. But with that being said, let's see here. And Atlanta Falcons Rise Up says Mike Evans top 15. Mike Evans is actually a guy that I think is underrated. I think Mike Evans is a guy who's a lot better than a lot of people think. He doesn't get the credit that he deserves, because prior to Tom Brady being on his team, it was similar to what the Falcons experienced, where Mike Thomas just played for the Buccaneers, and a lot of people prior to Tom Brady going there just don't watch a lot of Buccaneers games unless you live in the area. But I think Mike Thomas is a guy that could be somewhere in that top 10 as well. He's 6'5", 200 plus pounds, and it's a guy who's faster than D-Hop, faster than a lot of those guys, and is a guy who can high point the football. Hands is not as strong as D-Hop, but he's a guy that runs good routes, and he's a guy that is definitely one of the better wide receivers in the game, and the guy that doesn't get credit for what he's done. Like, he doesn't get a lot of credit for what he's done prior to Tom Brady being on the team with him. Let's see here. And Atlanta Falcons Rise Up says AJ is going to have a comeback season like Moss did. If you're referring to AJ Green, I don't know about that. I seen somebody mention AJ Green in the chat, and he actually signed with the Arizona Cardinals. I think he's going to be a solid number 2 wide receiver behind DeAndre Hopkins, but AJ Green is a guy that struggled with injuries. He was a guy came out of Georgia. A lot of people used to put him in the same category with a Julio Jones. Who was better, AJ Green or Julio, when he was in Cincinnati for a lot of those early seasons in his career when he was in his prime? Personally, I don't think that AJ Green at this point is a guy. I could see him doing some things with Arizona, but his main problem is injuries. Like, he's a very injury-prone wide receiver or football player. So at this point, I don't know if he can get through a full 17-game schedule healthy. If he can get through a full season healthy, then he can possibly have a resurgence. But I don't see him doing it. I can't remember the last time AJ Green made it out of a season healthy at this point. He's missed a ton of time over the last couple years of his career. And Just K Styles, y'all go definitely hit that like and subscribe button for my boy Just K Styles. He's also on his way to 1,000 subscribers as well. And this is Atlanta Falcons Nation's family as well. He said Mike Evans is underrated like Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen is another guy who's definitely underrated, plays with the Chargers. A lot of people in the LA area don't care about football like that. And they don't really pay attention to their players. But Keenan Allen is another guy. If he was on any other team, like if he was on a marquee team like the Packers or the Cowboys, on one of those teams that gets a lot of recognition, the Seahawks, if he was on one of those more popular teams, the Steelers, he would get more pub. Keenan Allen is better than a lot of guys that get a lot of credit, like Juju Smith-Schuster, because he plays with Steelers. A lot of people talk about him. He's not even, in the same atmosphere as a guy like Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's another guy that's could be a top 10 wide receiver, another guy that's long, runs great routes, probably better route runner than Mike Evans. He's one of the top route runners in my book, if you go look at some tape on Keenan Allen. But I definitely agree. I definitely think that Keenan Allen is a gem, and there's another guy that's really underrated, doesn't get a lot of credit for what he's done in his career, but he's a guy that's very dangerous route runner and very dangerous receiver. And he's a guy that's better than AJ Green. We were just mentioning AJ Green. Yeah, Keenan Allen at this point, he's surpassed guys like AJ Green at this point. Let's see. And Tony Wright about to take me to school. He says AJ Green made 7 straight Pro Bowls, 2011 and 2017. Then 2018 and 19 was injured a lot. He played the entire season in 2020. He's back. We'll see. Like I said before, I'm a guy, based off of consistency. Yeah, AJ Green has had some solid seasons and he's been a Pro Bowler, but his game is taking a dip. Now, it could have been because he was playing for a bottom feeder team like the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, what player is going to get shine playing for the Bengals? The Bengals have sucked for years, ever since pretty much Carson Palmer in the Chad Ochocinco or Chad Johnson days. Those guys have been a horrible franchise. But I think AJ Green is solid. I'm not trying to crap on AJ Green. I definitely think that AJ Green is a solid wide receiver, but I don't, foresee him being a guy that's going to be a game changer unless he can stay healthy. And he has to prove it to me before I'm going to give him the nod. If it came down to me, comparing him to a player like a Keenan Allen or Mike Evans at this point, I'm taking those guys every day of the week over AJ Green. It's a reason the Cincinnati Bengals allowed him to walk at this point in his career. He's a guy that's kind of taking a dip. And like I said, he's an older wide receiver at this point. AJ Green has been in the league for almost 10 seasons. So if not 10 seasons already. So he's definitely one of those guys. Still has some game. I compare an AJ Green type to like a Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins is another guy who's had some success in the league, was playing with the Chiefs, but couldn't stay healthy. He was a guy that's always injured, has talent, but just couldn't stay healthy. So we'll see what AJ Green does. I wish him nothing but the best there in Arizona. And that's my point. Jabari Williams just said last season, I think he said that AJ Green had 1 touchdown last season. Yeah, that goes to show you, like, AJ Green I don't think he's back. That's why I say that he's a guy that, at this point, he's not what he used to be. He's not a bad wide receiver, but he's not what he used to be at this point. But if we don't have any more questions, I am about to get off in a couple minutes. Just scrolling through to take a look, see if I missed anybody. Let's see. Devon says, outside of Ridley and Gage, obviously 1 or 2 wide receiver on the team, who can be the 3rd or 4th wide receiver on the depth chart? Good question, Devon. I think the 3rd wide receiver could be a guy like Frank Darby. It could be Kyle Pitts, because I think Kyle Pitts is a Swiss Army knife. Like, he's a wide receiver / tight end / football player. So he could easily be 1,000-yard receiver or 1,000-yard tight end, whatever you want to call him. But if you just want to stick to strictly, the depth chart of who we have at the wide receiver position, I think the 3rd wide receiver is going to come down to a battle between Frank Darby and Olamide Zaccheaus. Those are the 2 guys that I think is going to, and Tajay Sharp. Tajay Sharp is another guy I keep forgetting about, who's going to compete as well. He has the size over Zaccheaus, and Darby are not the biggest guys. So Tajay Sharp has an advantage because he's played under Arthur Smith's scheme. So he could easily get more snaps because he already knows the playbook. But I think that when it all comes down to it, I think that Frank Darby is something about Frank Darby. I think he's a guy that's going to, scratch and claw his way some way, somehow to get on the field, because he's a guy that is good at catching the ball in traffic. I haven't really seen that with Olamide Zaccheaus. Now, Zaccheaus is dangerous as well because of his speed, but I think that Frank Darby is a little bit more physical than a guy like Zaccheaus. Zaccheaus actually went down with an injury last year. So we definitely will see. Let me see if I hit this. Okay, so I have a super chat as well. And let me see if I can find where the super chat went. Hold on. Give me 1 second. And we have another super chat in the building, if it will pop up here. And she says, Jew, I'm loving the content. Looking forward to the heavy hitters season. And you get the victory bell, and I appreciate that super chat of $5. As we say, the $5 holler. And as Mike would say, $5 in the Mad Mike voice. But we do appreciate that super chat. And we are definitely looking forward to this upcoming season and giving you guys the top Atlanta Falcons content, giving you guys the stats, the facts, and the truth, like we do here at Atlanta Falcons Nation. But I do appreciate the super chat. Everybody that continues to view, my show on Wednesday nights, I really appreciate you guys, and I love doing this, the Q&A with you guys, and we love doing all of the shows that we do here on Atlanta Falcons Nation. So definitely continue to tune in. I really appreciate the $5. And it looks like you guys love the bell. Everybody's talking about the victory bell. And we're gonna hopefully hear a lot more of that victory bell this upcoming season after wins this season and with you guys super chat. So I really appreciate it. But like I was stating before, I don't know if I finished my statement, but as far as the wide receivers, like I said, I think it's going to come down to Frank Darby, Olamide Zaccheaus. Those are the two guys that I'm looking at to be that third wide receiver, and Tajay Sharp. Those three guys are going to battle it out in training camp. I think all of them bring something different to the table. Tajay Sharp is a guy that has the size and speed. Frank Darby is a guy that has, the ability to go deep, and he's a guy that's great at catching the ball in traffic from what I'm seeing from his college tape. And then Olamide Zaccheaus is just a straight burner. He has the speed, kind of like Turbo Taylor when we had Taylor Gabriel here. That's who Olamide Zaccheaus reminds me of. He's a guy that can return punts and kickoffs like he did in college at UVA. And he's a guy that also can go deep, and he's proved that against the Denver Broncos last season when Matt Ryan had that 50-yard touchdown pass to Olamide Zaccheaus. He's a guy that can, get deep on safeties and things of that nature and can make, plays down the field. So I definitely think that we have a great chance, and that we're going to have a great battle at that third wide receiver position this season in training camp. But I seen another question here that I wanted to hit, and I didn't hit on this in Atlanta Falcons news, but I talked about it in my last video. So if you didn't get a chance to check out my last video, definitely go to my channel, Jew Talk Sports, and hit that like and subscribe button and check out my last video. I talked about Kyle Pitts signing his new contract and Justin Houston. And Rodney Brown says, any chance we look at Justin Houston? So rumors have it that, the word on the street is that Justin Houston is interested in signing either with the Falcons or the Ravens. Those are the two teams that he's interested in. They haven't said which team has the edge right now. Personally, I think it'll come down to Justin Houston as far as, is it about the money or is it about being able to win? Personally, if I remember correctly, I believe that Justin Houston played his college ball for the University of Georgia. I believe he was a Georgia Bulldog. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I'm an Auburn Tigers fan, so I wouldn't actually, I don't remember exactly if he was a Georgia Bulldog or not, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe he did play his college football at Georgia. So that could, play into his hands of wanting to come and join the Atlanta Falcons, being that he, is familiar with the area, familiar with the state of Georgia. But I'm not sure at this point where he's leaning. If I were him, I would sign with the Atlanta Falcons for the mere fact that you're playing inside a dome half the season, or for majority of the season, because you're going to go up against teams like the New Orleans Saints. You're going to play at least 7 to 8 games a season in the dome. You're not going to have to deal with those elements. And if you are from up north, I actually grew up in the state of Virginia. It gets really cold up north, like Virginia, the DC area, Baltimore. When those winter months come around, it gets really cold. So unless, you like playing in the elements, he may want to come to a place like Atlanta where you get to play on that fast track, play indoors and play in a better, play in better facilities. Because we know that the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is one of the best stadiums in the NFL. And as a pass rusher, you have better traction as far as your cleats and things of that nature. Playing indoors, you're a lot faster on turf than you are outside. So maybe that plays a factor and if Justin Houston wants to sign with a team like the Atlanta Falcons. But I definitely think that the Falcons are looking at him, and it's a high probability that we could see Justin Houston land in Atlanta. I really think that it's a high chance that he decides to choose the Falcons because we have a lot of young weapons on this team. And another reason that I didn't mention is Dean Pease. Excuse me, give me 1 second. Dean Pease is definitely one of those guys I definitely think as well could be a key reason that Justin Houston chooses the Atlanta Falcons. Because if you've seen the guys like Deron Harmon and a lot of the veterans that signed with us, Eric Harris, a lot of them talked about, they wanted to play for a defensive coach like Dean Pease, a guy who's had a track record of being one of the best defensive minds in the game, has never been fired from a job, pretty much has coached the cream of the crop. He's coached in Baltimore, coached the Tennessee Titans, coached in New England with the Patriots. So he's been one of those guys who's been around the league and had great success. And that could be a reason why Justin Houston wants to join the Atlanta Falcons, is to be coached by a guy like Dean Pease, who's going to allow him to wreak havoc and bring pressure from everywhere on the field. Let's see here. And let's see, ATL Falcons rise up. I think Pitt's going to bring more to the table than Julio. I don't know if I can say that legitimately because we haven't seen Kyle Pitts play a snap yet. And I definitely want to be careful when you're talking about a guy like Julio Jones. Julio Jones is definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer at this point. If he doesn't play another snap in his career, he's definitely been one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. So we can't put Kyle Pitts in his stratosphere yet because he hasn't played in the NFL yet. We haven't seen what he can do on this level. But I definitely think that Kyle Pitts is as versatile as Julio Jones. He can play tight end. He can play wide receiver. He's bigger than Julio Jones. He's not as fast as Julio Jones, but he runs routes really well. And he could possibly, when it's all said and done, go down as one of the greatest wide receivers or one of the greatest tight ends or pass catchers to ever, lace them up with our Atlanta Falcons. But that book, hasn't been written yet. It's still an empty, a lot of empty pages for a guy like Kyle Pitts. Julio Jones, his book is already closed with the Atlanta Falcons. So we've seen what he did in his illustrious career. And right now, I wouldn't, want to put a guy like Julio Jones. It's not fair to Kyle Pitts to put him in the same sentence as a guy like Julio Jones. But I think that Kyle Pitts, if you look at just what he did in college, he definitely has a chance just based off of being a generational talent, being a physical specimen. He has all of the tools to definitely be, on Julio Jones's level, or definitely, possibly in his career in that Hall of Fame status. Let's see here. And I'm going to take just a few more questions and then we're going to call it a night. But I do appreciate all of you guys' questions. And someone finally confirmed for me. I thank you for that, Devon. He said he did play for UGA, meaning Justin Houston. So he did play at Georgia. So I appreciate you confirming that for me because I couldn't remember if he was a Georgia Bulldog. So that could bode well for the Falcons. Maybe he wants to come back to Georgia, kind of like Todd Gurley did. And his career at this point, it looks like he's kind of wrapping up. He's on the back end of his career. Maybe he wants to come home. Let's see here. And I like this comment here. He says, Christian Blake, don't sleep on Cordell Patterson. Yeah, those two guys are other guys that are on the roster as well that could make some waves. I think Cordell Patterson is going to be mainly used as a running back and special teamer. I don't think he's going to play a ton of wide receiver, barring injury. But Christian Blake is a guy last year that showed he's been here developing under Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones for the last 3-4 seasons. And he could be a guy that could come in and shock a lot of people in training camp. And good news is this coaching staff is going to give all of these guys ample opportunity to compete. they're not going to just hand the job, they're not going to play favorites and hand the job to Tarjay Sharp because he's played for Arthur Smith before. He's going to make all these guys compete. And that's another reason I'm looking forward to the preseason. I'm looking forward to preseason and training camp because you're going to get to see these guys battle it out in game action on the field in preseason to see who deserves, who deserves that third wide receiver position or deserves a spot on this 53-man roster. And the real says, great show on Wednesdays, Jew. I really appreciate that, man. Please like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends to come holler at your boy. Come check me out on Wednesday nights. I really appreciate you guys, kicking it with me every Wednesday. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to take about 3 more questions, and then we're going to call it a night because I know that the NBA playoffs is getting ready to the NBA Western Conference Finals will be coming on at 9. So definitely don't want to compete with the NBA Finals or the Western Conference Finals and the NBA playoffs. And I actually want to check it out myself as well. I'm a huge NBA fan as well. And shout out to those Atlanta Hawks last night for putting the beat down on the Bucks last night. I wish Giannis Antetokounmpo nothing but the best. I am a huge Greek Freak fan as well. I think he's a solid player. Like I said, I'm a huge NBA fan. Trae Young, I'm a huge fan as well. He was injured last night, and Sweet Lemon Pepper Lou stepped up last night. The 6th man stepped up and did his thing last night. Bogdanovich, those guys held it down last night. So shout out to those young Atlanta Hawks making waves in Atlanta. They're the biggest thing. They're the talk of the town right now. So these Atlanta Falcons this season, they're going to have a hard act to follow, whether the Hawks make it to the finals or not. Just them making it to the Eastern Conference Finals is a huge deal in the city of Atlanta. So shout outs to those Atlanta Hawks. Even though I'm not an Atlanta Hawks fan, I'm a huge NBA fan, and I'm a huge fan of what the Atlanta Hawks are doing. And let's see. Rodney Brown says, who you think might be the surprise veteran cut? Ooh, this is a good question. Not too sure right now because that could be really hard when it comes to, when you're saying the cuts. I think it could be maybe, I say maybe defensive lineman. This might shock a lot of people. I'm gonna say it, and you heard it here first. This is an exclusive here on Jew Talk Sports and What's the Word, Dirty Bird. I think that Tyler Davison, this might shock a lot of people. I don't know how this would affect as far as his contract because I think he restructured his contract. But I think if he's not cut this year, he could be a cap casualty or a guy that gets cut this offseason. But I could really see them moving on from a guy like Tyler Davison because he hasn't lived up to the hype. And I think that Marlon Davison is a guy that's going to possibly beat him out for the starting role. And we've added a little bit of depth at the defensive tackle position. So depending on how the guys that we brought in, like Bullard is a guy that we don't mention a lot. Tyquan Graham, those guys are guys we brought in to kind of play that 3-tech and nose position. Depending on how well he plays this year in the preseason and things of that nature, or I really could see Tyler Davison getting cut. To me, he hasn't lived up to the hype when we brought him in from New Orleans. Even though he was kind of a bargain being, a free agent, I'm not a big fan of Tyler Davison, and I really think that he kind of stole money from Atlanta. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get cut. And if he did get cut, it really wouldn't bother me any. I'm kind of cutthroat when it comes to that. Kind of like Arthur Smith and Bill Belichick. Like if you're not cutting it, you're not cutting it. And I think that Tyler Davison is one of those guys that we brought in a couple years ago. Everybody's on Dante Fowler's neck for last season, him not performing. But to me, Tyler Davison hasn't performed well at all since he's been here in Atlanta. To me, he's underperformed. He was brought in to replace a guy like Dontari Poe, and he fell epically at filling that role. So he hasn't done a good job of being that guy to free up a guy like Greg Jarrett or be that help on the inside. To me, Tyler Davison has really struggled. Since he's been here in Atlanta. So he's a guy that I could see being a surprise veteran cut that a lot of people, haven't been stating, but I could see him getting cut this year. or next year. It wouldn't surprise me. But with that being said, first I got to give my boy a shout out, Mr. Motivator. He's always usually the first one in here, usually the first one that comments on my videos and things of that nature. So shout outs to Mr. Motivator. He said this year is going to look different, and I completely agree. I think this year, this Falcons team is going to shock a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people expect anything from my Atlanta Falcons, and for whatever reason, usually when teams, sleep on us or when the media sleeps on us, that's when Atlanta sneaks up on everybody and surprise everybody and have a great season. And I could see this year definitely being one of those seasons where, we come out of nowhere because we were, left dead in the waters last year at 4-12, picking in the top 5 in the draft. A lot of people are sleeping on us, snoozing on us and things of that nature. And I think they might wake up a sleeping giant. They might wake up a beast, and being that we don't have the target on our back this year, like we've had since 2016, making the Super Bowl. I think that, the last 3 years have been down years, losing seasons, missing the playoffs. I don't think that any team or anybody in the media is really expecting anything from the Falcons, especially now that Julio Jones is no longer the talk of the town or the toast of the town. I think a lot of people are sleeping on us, but I think it's going to look a lot different, Mr. Motivator. I agree with that. But with that being said, I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to get off here for the night. So let's see here. And we do thank you guys for the super chat. I appreciate each and every one of you guys for continuing, to support your boy here at Atlanta Falcons Nation, Jew Talk Sports. We appreciate you guys for everything you do, not just your super chats, not just for the likes and subscribes, but just always tuning in with us. Like we always say, K-Style says it all the time. We're not just Atlanta Falcons Nation, but we're all Atlanta Falcons Nation. And we seen earlier that we had somebody tuning in from South Africa. So that just shows you that Atlanta Falcons Nation is worldwide. We're taking over. So we appreciate each and every one of you guys. And let's see who's going to be the last question of the night. And it's all good, Brian Peoples. You can watch it on the playback. He says that he's late and he missed the live video. You always can go on the playback and rewatch it. And please like, share, subscribe. Even after the fact, drop some questions. If you have some questions on some videos you would like me to do and things of that nature, definitely do that as well. And this is going to be the last question of the night. And it's Mr. Tony Wright. He says, will Marlon Davidson get 5 or 6 sacks in 2021? My answer to that is going to be he should. I don't know if he will, but I think he should because he's playing on, opposite Grady. Grady, we know, is a monster. And you're playing off Grady, you should be able to get after the quarterback. I'm not too sure if he can get 5 or 6 sacks, but I think he should. And I think that if he wants to, overtake Tyler Davison for that starting role as the defensive tackle, Marlon Davidson is a guy that can move up and down the line. He's not only a guy that can play inside, but he can play outside. That's why you put the, defensive end / defensive tackle. So depending on how Dean Pease uses him, which I think Dean Pease is going to move him up and down the line all over the place. He's a guy also can come off the edge, which he did pretty well at Auburn his last season because him and Derek Brown was playing there. He was a guy that they moved his junior year to the defensive end position. So he's a guy that is multifaceted, and he's a guy I definitely think that can get 5 or 6 sacks this season. So I'll say we're going to go with the over. I think he gets, let's say he gets 5.5 sacks on the season. How about that? But I definitely think that he's a guy that can definitely overtake Tyler Davison and definitely get 5 to 6 sacks. It's all going to come down to the way that he's used in this scheme. And if he applies himself and he goes in and learns from the best. Grady is one of the best in the game. If you can't learn from Grady, you can't learn from anybody. So you got Grady in that room with you. You got Dean Pease in those defensive meeting rooms with you, which are 2 of the best defensive players and defensive coaches of all time. As long as you got those guys, Dante Fowler and all these guys to help you, You know, if he develops, I definitely think that Marlon Davidson could wreak havoc on the quarterback. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew, please hit that like, please hit that subscribe button. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Devon says, great show, Jew. Keep up the good work. Shout out to K Styles, Maggie T, Mad Mike, J Rock, Twisted Torch TV, and Mr. Jew Talk Sports. Salute to y'all. Well, we appreciate that, man. We appreciate each and every one of you guys continuing to tune in each and every week. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew, you guys tune in, I believe, tomorrow night. K Styles will be doing his show, which is, I think, the 6-man convo. So you guys tune in tomorrow. I believe he does his show at 8 p.m. on Thursdays, I believe. So shout outs to K Styles. You guys definitely go and hit that like and share, subscribe for him as well. And then tune in on Friday night as well, which I believe is Friday Night Madness at 8 p.m. And then we're at you guys also on Mondays, kicking it with K Styles, which is usually at 8 p.m. as well. And that's usually me, Matt, Mike, and K Styles. We're kind of prepping you guys for the season, which it'll be on Tuesday nights, going back to our heavy hitter show. But with that being said, this been your boy Jew. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. And as always, Falcons Nation, rise up. Peace and love. Y'all have a great night.